Streaming live via the internet. Welcome to ISP Radio, your weekly source for ISP-related news, events, and interviews with industry experts. If you deliver internet via fiber optic, wireless, coax, or any other way, you're in the right place. Chat live with us weekly via ispradio.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And now a brief word from our sponsors. Link Technologies, providing ISP consulting, support, and hardware for wireless ISPs. TowerCoverage.com, providing online RF coverage maps. Mimosa Networks, providing high-density, high-bandwidth radio products. Advanced LLC, providing retail and wholesale advanced communication services by matching providers with your bandwidth needs. And by Sitel, providing reliability in surge suppression. And now your host for ISP Radio, Steve Grabiel and Dennis Burgess.
Welcome to another edition of ISP Radio. I'm your host, Steve Grabiel, broadcasting my stream from sunny Southern California. And I've got Dennis, the brains behind the operation, the producer and co-host of the show out in St. Louis, doing his thing. So, Dennis, any news out there, or tell us what's going on in your neck of the woods? Tell me about your 802.11a link.
Oh, you have to bring that up, don't you? Well,
you brought it up.
Well, okay. So yeah, I mean, we moved some new offices, and we have some great new offices. Everything's looking really great here. But our internet speed is not up to par yet. We've been sitting there waiting for an upgrade of our tower. We're currently up on a tower right next door to the building. But the problem is that sector is still an old sector, and it's still an 802.11a sector, believe it or not. Not even an N sector. So we're kind of limited in bandwidth there. But other than that, it's not a big deal. It's working out so far anyway for us. But that's why you have Microtech, man. We can sit there and queue up everything, prioritize, VoIP, all that kind of good stuff. And most people never even, you don't even notice it for the most part. So other than that, it's been raining here a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. I think the last 3 days have been just constant rain. Other than that, again, there's not a whole lot of industry news. We have WISP America coming up in Louisville, Kentucky. That looks like to be a fabulous, the location is the downtown Marriott. That looks really, really nice. Was there last week. Other than that, like I said, there's just not a whole lot. It's the end of the year. Everybody's starting to do their, hey, let's go to holidays, and we have events and family things. So until that really gets done, I know a lot of people kind of start down, taking the what they're doing on a day-by-day basis, and they keep doing the installs and the support and all that, but they really kind of wean down these big projects. They don't want to do these big projects during the holidays. So we do see that as well.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, other than that, there's not that much stuff going on. Obviously, we still have lots of consulting work for Link Technologies. We just got a massive order, our order anyway, of Telrad gear. So we have lots of Telrad gear that is in stock. So if anybody's interested in that, hey, all you have to do is give us a call. We have a lot of that we could ship the same day, usually in many cases. Of course, that stuff goes pretty dang quick. A lot of customers are pretty... Well, they pretty much wait until they need it, and then they order it, and then it's, it takes a little bit to get. And then the other big thing, of course, is those Mimosa B11s definitely coming in. We're getting a lot of orders for those. A lot of people are anxious. A lot of people are anxious to see it as well, to see what it can actually do. And I'm real anxious. I've seen that in the beta products, so I'm not really worried about what can it do. I know what it can do, once we get them. One bad thing, I'm just going to tell everybody this, and Mimosa's done a really fabulous job at bringing this to us. But what's going to happen is we're going to get a very limited amount of stock here in December, so just in a few weeks. And once that stock is gone, we're probably not going to get it until either late or early first quarter to second quarter next year. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a good little chunk of stock in, and then it's going to be a little bit before we get more stock. And they're going to work on that. Hopefully it's not as bad as that, but we'll see how it all works out in the end, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what you're selling the Mimosa 11 gig gear for?
Well, I mean, the 11 gig radios basically are $4,000 a set, so it's $2,000 a radio. The way we are currently packaging it, and it depends on your link, we can do as long as it's not a huge link where you need 4-foot dishes or 6-foot dishes or something insane. If it's standard, a good standard link, honestly, you can get out the door, including your frequency coordination, with one invoice from Link Technologies for basically about $7,000.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
so
I
that'd
mean-
be like with a 2-foot dish or 3-foot maybe?
Yeah, I believe it's with a 3-foot. So I mean that covers most people that need 11 gig. I mean, there's obviously going to be people that's going to be outside, and if you're outside that, it could be a little less because you may have FCC IDs, you may have some FCC things that will make that cost go down a little bit on the frequency coordination. But literally, this is a complete, here's a single invoice, go from there. Now, here's really the cool part that we're doing, something that we're doing that I know a lot of others are not. We're taking the Mimosa radio. We don't have them in stock yet. They're coming in December. Okay, we're going to be one of the very first companies to have them. Okay, what we're doing is we're basically saying, how about this? $1,800 is basically the maximum price that a frequency coordination will be. So what we'll do is we'll take the $1,800 and we'll add $400. That $400 is your 10% down to reserve a pair of radios for you. Okay? We take that. Now we start your frequency coordination right away. And hopefully by the time that's done, late December, early January, hopefully that frequency coordination will be complete. And by the time you get your radios, you'll be ready to deploy them. So basically for your $2,200 or so, you're doing your frequency coordination right away, and you're reserving a set of radios for you. And that's it. And we won't charge you anything more until, of course, the radios come in, and unless there's some other problem with the frequency coordination or something. But so we're basically giving you a very minimal cost to basically reserve a set of radios. You can do that right on our website, linktex.net. That's LINKTECHS.net, and I'll actually toss that up on the screen here as well. Oh, that's you. But there you go. I mean, you can easily see those. We have plenty of these B11s. You can pre-order them. You can come right down here. You can even add your frequency coordination. If you want to do it yourself or you have somebody else to do it, you can. And then, of course, we have the different jars, dish sizes, and you can select those as well and add all that to your cart and just reserve those for you as needed. So, again, the big thing here is $7,000 for a complete 11 gigahertz licensed link that has the potential to do a gig downstream and several hundred meg, 300-400 meg upstream is very, very inexpensive.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
I mean, you figure this. At the $7,000 price, you're getting a licensed radio that you don't have to worry about interference. You're getting roughly a gigabit downstream plus some upstream, and if you do the math, you're basically under $5 a meg.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're right in the price tag of where you're at buying bandwidth from many different bandwidth providers. So you're right in the right price range to transport that bandwidth. So you're not spending a whole lot of money, and you're getting a lot of speed out of it.
Right. Question I have, Dennis, do you guys work with any finance companies?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have several WISPA vendor members, as well as several companies that we have internally. I believe Ritalia is in there. They're a WISPA vendor member as well. And we work with them. And what's really nice with these guys is let's say you go, I don't have $7,000 to just cash out. And I understand that. I mean, a lot of companies operate on a cash basis like that. So if you figure $7,000 and you figure you take that and you divide that by 24 months, that's $291 a month. That's less than a car payment or a truck payment, but you can make that an option. I mean, you can make it 36 months. Okay. So you do the math on that, and you're basically down to under $200. Now, you still have a little interest in there. And, yes, you are going to pay interest to any type of funding company. That's how they make their money. They have to make their money somehow, right? But it's a very inexpensive thing. You bring that cost back to a simple monthly payment, and it's just as if you're buying a fiber link, except once the monthly payments are done, usually there's a $1 buyout, and that's it. You're done. You don't have to pay anymore. Yeah, you own it. Yeah, again, it's just like buying a car or a truck or something that you regularly finance. And many companies have found that financing those types of deals allows you to get the bigger product quicker, and that allows you to deploy better and faster as well.
Yeah. It's really helpful in cash flow.
Oh yeah.
Instead of puking the $7,000, it's a lot easier to dovetail that into your existing cash flow if you possibly can. That's what I've found by using leasing. No, you could build an entire network or a 11 gig network all over the place for pretty reasonable, it sounds anymore, especially with the new Mimosa product.
Yep. Yeah, but it shouldn't be a big problem at all. And this product, I mean, this is just like any other nice high-end licensed link. It's not really a product that you're going to be expecting that is going to be having problems. It's not like you're putting a $30 or a $50 radio on two sides. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, our topic for today was something that I heard a lot at Wispalooza about with compliance and stuff, about Calea Complaince. Unfortunately for us, the panelist that sat on that board is with us right now. And I think I've interviewed Dennis on this specific topic before, but I would like to revisit the topic. It's Calea Complaince. And the reason why I want to redo this is because things have changed, I'm sure. And Dennis is a guru in this space. So, Dennis, tell us about any changes that you see in Calea Complaince, what it is, how do we go about complying with it, and, what are the ramifications of not doing it?
Sure. Well, first off, I want to make sure I point out that even though I am in charge of the WISPA Clea committee, I am by no means a Clea expert. There is a lot of documentation inside there, but we're going to give you the kind of general rundown. All right. So the very first part is, what is Calea Complaince? Well, Clea is basically governmental or FBI. It also could be other types of law enforcement agencies. It gives them the ability to create basically a wiretap on a internet service. Okay, so if they suspect someone is doing illicit activities on their internet connection, they're selling drugs, they're doing child porn, who knows what that may be, what they're doing is that they're then taking that information and they want to capture that in basically near real time, not necessarily real time, but near real time, and to get that data quickly and effectively to be able to analyze it and to be able to go forward in their prosecution. Now, there are a number of different things. To be Calea compliant, you have to have a solution that allows them to get that data in a common standardized form. And that is what the WISPA Clea Compliance document is. There's a document that explains exactly how all of this data is going to be stored, how all of this data is going to be forwarded, etc. Okay, and WISPA's had that for many, many years, and it's still an ongoing process. So right now the committee is working with the FBI and other state and other governmental agencies to ensure that we have excellent data, and that now we have IPv6 coming out and is becoming more prevalent. They want to make sure they can capture that information as well, not just IPv4. So they're just updating the standard. That's all it is. Now, the Clea standard, though, the ideal behind that is to be able to get those wiretaps and to be able to do it in a common centralized mechanism. So for you to be compliant, there's actually roughly 3 things that has to happen. So the very first thing is you have to have a solution. You have to have a way to get that data to law enforcement. Easy enough. Now, for all practicality, Microtech has a solution called the Clea package, and that, even though it's an older WISPA Clea standard, still is good enough in many cases for compliance in that aspect. But that's not all of the compliance. That's not the entire thing. So there's another form, on the FCC, and I'm going to have to be honest with you, I had to look it up. I don't even remember the number anymore. But there's a specific form that allows you to file with the FCC and specifically state, here is the contacts for Clea reporting and Clea requests with my company. Okay, this gives you, or helps you anyway, in that safe harbor, giving you the data stating that, no, I'm a transit provider, I don't host that content, but for me to do the Clea compliance, you need to contact this name and number, etc., so that you can get that done. Now, that's I think it's like a $25 or a $50 or even a free one. It's not an expensive form to fill out with the FCC. But you do have to do that, and I'm going to try to find that here in a little bit for you as well so we can tell everybody before the end of the show. The very last thing is whatever that person is or whatever that number is, they actually have to answer. Now, there is no set standard, the way I understand it, of exact response time, but I'm going to give you some examples. Most response times are usually within 12 to 24 hours. Now, most WISPs probably can do that. That's not a problem. Other requests, Clea requests, can specifically be, hey, I have a Clea request that needs a response in 1 hour or 2 hours. Very, very fast, because maybe the user is moving about. I don't know what there's obvious other reasons for that, but the response time needs to be very quick. So this is where all of a sudden some of the compliance issues that we have becomes very complex. How do you, as a small WISP or a small operator, handle those types of requests in a fast and efficient manner? Now, I am going to tell everybody right now, how likely are you to get a Clea request? Well, I'm not going to say that you're not going to get one. However, the majority of ISPs probably do not get them in a general year. Bigger you get, though, more compliance you need, and chances are more users equals also greater chance of you getting a Clea request. I know a few customers of mine that have had 0 requests, and I've had some other customers that have had 4 requests in 1 year. And there's not necessarily the scale. Maybe the area that they're serving is a little bit more prone to law enforcement activity. Maybe there's known issues in that area. I don't know. Obviously, the government knows, or the law enforcement knows. But those are just options in there. So how do you take all of those things and put it together into this Clea compliance to be in compliance? Well, again, you can put it together yourself. If you want to take that responsibility, you can put that in yourself. So you can sit there and put in your own Clea compliance hardware. You can put in your fill out your own FCC form, and you can be your own person or Clea officer that handles those Clea requests. Now, what if you're a small company and you don't have all of that funds and all that money, etc., to take care of those things? There are other companies out there that offer Clea compliance solutions, and their goal is to basically say, you pay us XYZ amount of money every month. Maybe there may be hardware that you have to buy. Maybe that is not the case, but you give us access, you give us a decent amount of network documentation so that we need, or we know how to handle a Clea request on your network, and the remote access and capabilities to do that. Now we're talking, right? And then whenever they go out and take that form and fill it out from the FCC and say, hey, here's this compliance form, call us. Now they have a staff that all their job is to process those Clea requests. That staff handles the hardware, etc., and the compliance issues on your network. So now you, as a network operator, focus on your network, and not focus on Clea compliance, or at least not make that huge effort on Clea compliance. So there are some WISPA vendor members. You'll definitely, if you didn't see them at the show, go see them at the show. You can definitely look on wispa.org and try to find out who they are. There are a few of them. Some of them are more expensive than others. I do know that some of them, I'm just going to toss out a number that I remember. One, depending on what hardware you have already, you can be as little as $300 a month, and they take care of all your compliance. So all of a sudden, it brings it down to that realm of, hey, that's less than the cost of a 11 gigahertz license link on a monthly basis, so why don't we take a look at that? So again, a number of different things inside there, but there you go. That's where we get started at. How's that?
Yeah. So I'm probably in the group that says I can't afford the $300 a month, and you mentioned that I could do this myself, which is probably the path I'm looking at going. What kind of gear, since you're an integrator, and I'm sure you've done this before for other ISPs in my similar situation, what kind of gear is necessary to get this up and running to where it's managed by myself? I'm the Calea Compliance Officer. I mean, what do you recommend?
Well, I mean, see, there's lots of different pieces of hardware out there. So I'm just going to tell you the hardware that I know people are using. So having a Microtech, if you have a Microtech at the tower and or at your network edge, that's usually the best. Usually closer to the customer, the better, assuming that is a single customer, okay? And there's all kinds of compliance and governmental issues that you have to watch out for, privacy issues, things like that you need to be aware of. Typically, the request is for a very specific address, and if that address has service, then you're probably pretty good. But you have to be able to single out any and all traffic. And this is actually a big issue, is that when you say any and all traffic, what does that mean? Well, if you only have a Clea solution at your network edge, how can you be sure that that's any and all network traffic to and from that customer completely? Well, you can't. What about inside your network? Is there a possibility that there's traffic inside the network? And it is. There very well could be possibilities. Now, law enforcement may not necessarily be using this hard data to basically prosecute. In other words, if you can sit there and say, well, it may have not been all the data, so how do we know this data is valid? Then the law enforcement may not be able to use it to directly prosecute, but they can use that information to help learn and help forward the progress. So keep that in mind. As far as hardware goes, a Microtech at your edge or tower, or CPE is probably the simplest. You do still need a Clea server. So there's two parts to the Microtech piece. One part is the Clea target, and one is the Clea server. So the target is basically the collector. That is the device that actually collects the data and then transports it back in a, not necessarily encoded form, but transports it back to the Clea server. And the Clea server takes that data, verifies it, creates hashing on it to verify so that you could later verify that the data hasn't been modified. And that Clea server is usually your data repository. That's where all the data goes. Now, here's a little issue that you get. Number one, when we look at Calea Complaince, the target is actually relatively easy. It's grabbing the data and sending it on its merry way. Now, let's say that target is an access point, okay, or a tower router, and that customer has a 10 meg by 10 meg package. But your server is back at your NOC. So now, for every bit that customer moves, you have to duplicate it and send it to that server. So now you're taking in excess of up to 20 meg, 10 meg up, 10 meg down, and sending it to that server. So your network has to be able to support that. On top of that, 10 meg by 10 meg can move a lot of data in a small amount of time. I mean, think about if you maxed out 10 meg, how many gigs of data can you get in an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, a day? All of a sudden, we can see that can be a lot of data. So your Clea server has to have enough space to be able to store that. Okay. Now there's some other things you can do. So for instance, if you have a several terabyte drive, like a 3 or 6 terabyte drive, and you're storing it, you can pull off the hard data because you are required to keep the MD5 hashes. The hashes on that data, I believe it's for 5 or 7 years. I don't remember which, but you are required to do that in case someone comes back and says, "Oh, this data may be tampered. Give us the original hash." And that's what that hash is for. You actually don't keep the data. You want to get that data off, and you want to get that data to the law enforcement agency as quickly as possible. In many cases, the law enforcement agency will be actively looking for that data and pulling it off as quickly as possible. So that may be a non-issue depending on how often the law enforcement agency pulls that off.
Right. So it depends on, and this is all on a point-by-point basis. What's the process that a ISP would experience going through a Calea compliance request? I mean, and to start with, what's Calea? What's the acronym for?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Okay, first question. What's Calea stand for?
It is the commission. You're asking me a good one. Commission something. Give me a sec. Commission of Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies.
Okay.
So
now,
there you go.
my next question, because I'm sure people have come to you. What do I do?
Yeah.
What what is the process that you've seen people go through that they've told you the stories of?
So
what happens?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to give you the data that I have, and I'm not going to sit there and tell you that this is 100% accurate because I was not there. Okay, so this is all third party. I have never had a Clea request come through me. Typically, they always go through my customer and their lawyer and or a compliance solution. Right. So the very first thing is you will get a request for a Clea, and it has to be properly formatted, all this kind of stuff. You need to verify that it is a properly formatted and accurate Clea request. Many times that involves having a lawyer or somebody look at it and go, yes, this is valid. You need to respond to it. Once that is done, you need to verify that you can, based on the data, and only the data in the request, that you can identify that singular user. Okay? In other words, if you sit there and they go, hey, I need you to capture all data to and from that, then you need to be able to make sure that there's not extra data. So the example would be as if that IP address is a hotspot at a coffee shop, right? Well, that may be outside the purview of what the request said because you're capturing, and you know you're capturing more than one user's data. So that you may not be able to capture that data for the law enforcement agency. Now, most of the time, the law enforcement agency, happy as can be to help and work with you as much as possible. Okay, all they want to do is get the data so they can prosecute these, hopefully these bad people, and that's the goal. But they still have to do a lot of things, such as ensuring that they are only collecting valid data. There's privacy issues, things like that. So you need to make sure that happens. Once all that basically comes down to, yes, we have a target, yes, it is their data, yes, everything is golden, now you actually do starting the data capture. Usually what happens is the data capture starts, it sends it to that server. That server, as data comes in and files are created, hashes are created. You pull off the hashes at a regular interval, and typically the agency will have some type of access or remote access to that. Especially as being ISPs, they usually have a remote access that usually has to be very secure, IPsec or OpenVPN, AES encryption, etc. And then they pull that data off in a timely manner as that data gets collected for their review.
So they have access to your Calea server.
Typically, that's not always the case, though. So, okay. I mean, there are instances where they just say, hey, this is going to be a capture for 24 hours, and after the 24 hours, we'll send a person over to get that data. You put it on a flash drive, or you put it on a hard drive, or whatever they bring, So, again, this is not all set in stone. It's not all, here is a strict policy and procedure, but there are things that you need to look for. And is it a valid request? Can you identify, based on the information that they're giving you, and only that information, not the information that you know, can you identify the singular user that would be there? And maybe you can, maybe you can't. Is there any issues with identifying that single user? And if you can't, like it's this hotspot, you need to inform. Who do you inform? And that Clea information will have that in there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So all that information is perfectly valid. And again, there's definitely some other people out there that can definitely get us a little better information. You know what I'm saying? All that information is really, really good, but again, it's not a complete picture of it as well. On top of that, now there's talk about having Voip standards. How do you do capturing for Voip? Things like that. So, the standards are always going to keep changing based on technology. And I know people don't want to spend it, but at some point in time, especially as us being Title II now, this may be just the cost of doing business. It really may be that you need to just start really looking at it and going, I just need to get compliant so that I am compliant, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. So I got a question for you. It's kind of like the DMCA notices. I'll get those, but they say, because I'm a double natted network, your IP is stealing stuff, and this is the content it stole. Of course, they can't drill down any further than the one IP that feeds my whole network. How is Calea able to, or following a request from Calea, how does that work on a double natted network?
Well, see, here's the problem. Technically, you're liable for it.
Right, because it's the IP.
Right, because you cannot, you as a transit provider, you cannot pin that on somebody. You cannot sit there and pass the proverbial buck, if that makes sense. So if the law enforcement agency wanted to go after you, they could. Bad thing. But overall, usually they don't do that because they see that you're transporting data. But the answer is, yeah, you can't identify the customer. But right now, to my knowledge, there is nothing that says you have to track that. Make sense? There's nothing that you actually have to sit there and go, okay, I have NAT. That's fine. But based on that NAT, I have to track all my NAT connections so that I can then take some piece of historical data that somebody comes with me a week from now and goes, who used this at this point in time?
Right.
Okay. You can't. Right now, there's not a standard for that. Not let me phrase this. There's not a requirement that we have to do that. So in most of those cases, you're just going to say, well, that goes to a NATed IP that has XYZ number of potential customers behind it. Therefore, we cannot identify an individual. Therefore, we cannot provide you with the data. And the law enforcement agency typically is just kind of SOL.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but like you said, they could come after you because it's your IP.
Correct. So, and while the chances of them doing that is probably very, very slim, you never know. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
So, I wouldn't dwell on it, but I wouldn't sit there and say, don't do anything, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. So in my situation, if I was wanting to become Calea compliant and put in this equipment and get it up and running and become compliant, is it almost pointless for me to do in my current situation?
In your situation, it'd be difficult to become compliant because of what you have in the back end.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the double natting and such, it would be very hard to single out those users, if that makes sense.
So in reality, transitioning to IPv6 would be the solution.
That would definitely help, because then if they came in and said, hey, we have an IPv6 address, now all of a sudden you have more ability to bring that down into a individual subscriber, and the chances of you getting more information or taking that information and bringing it to where they can look at it and they actually get information is much greater.
Well, here's a question just that popped in my mind. So, I got the double netted network, and say I buy a Procera box or something like that, and the ticket price sees this too. If the law enforcement came to me and said they're going to this IP address, couldn't we capture who is going to that IP address and what it's for, and
the answer is yes.
Root it out that way?
Yeah, you can capture it, but why? But think of the amount of the number of connections that you would possibly have, the amount of data that you would need to sort through just to get that.
Yeah.
Okay, so and currently there's not, at least again to my knowledge, there's not any requirement that we do that.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if it's a Procera. I mean, Microtech, I can take all that data, every connection, and log it to a syslog server, and now I have a timestamp and every connection source and internal IPs, ports, all that kind of good stuff. So I can do all that with the smallest of Microtech if I want to. The problem is that, one, storing that amount of information, and then two, being able to review it and to do something with it later on. And then how long do you store it?
Right. But you're saying there's no standard for that situation.
There's nothing that specifically says that you have to store that you have to track it, number one, and there's nothing that says you have to store it.
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
Yeah.
So, what I like to do here, real quick, is I'm gonna just hop. I actually have another person that I'm gonna see if we can get on the show here. This is one of our other Clea experts. It was kind of last minute to get him on the show, so I'm going to go talk with him real quick and see if we can get him on. How's that?
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm going to toss you back up and let you make your comments or talk about whatever you want to talk about. There you go.
Yeah, well, for Calea Complaince and myself, you've heard my situation, the double netted network. It's almost pointless to do, but, I want to help law enforcement where it makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense to you folks, but there's that kind of illegal traffic across my network just kind of doesn't sit well with me. But of course, am required to respond to a Calea response. I've never been served with a Calea request myself.
Yeah,
but who knows? It could happen.
And keep in mind that also that you also may have something that's not a Clea request. It could be a notice of wiretap or something like that. So it may not just be a quote Clea thing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bring Michael Hammer online here. Let's see if we can get him in this call real quick. Here he goes. Maybe. Michael, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Mike, I got Stephen Graviel. He's the host of our show. He's on with us. And we're just talking about Calea Complaince and basically what can small ISPs really do and what do they have to do to be in compliance with the current Clea requirements. And we were hoping that you and your company can shed some light on what's the basics. What do they need and what do they need to do to become compliant. And then Steve actually has a really good question about natted networks as well. That sound good?
Sure, yeah.
Excellent. I know it's last minute, and I appreciate you hopping on here last minute to get things to help us out at least a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
We appreciate it, Michael.
Yeah, sure.
So, Michael, the question is first off, what company are you with, and what makes you the Clea expert in these cases?
To try to keep it real short, I'm with Yana Technologies, and our team has been working in this field for quite some time. The company is only about 7 years old, but several of us have been doing this type of work, working with the FBI and other organizations since probably around 93, 94, when Clea first got started. And I was also one of the guys that was the main contributor, and I was also the editor of the J Standard 25 Alpha. So I had a bit of background in this, and it gets complicated pretty quickly.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So let's just ask this question. So we have a small ISP, wireless ISP provider, say 300 subscribers, and they need to become Clea compliant. What can Yana do for them to get them up to date?
I guess I would say one of the first things probably is just to contact us, and we can get into more details because some of these things do tie into what type of network it is and what type of equipment is being used. We have a number of different partners in some cases to help out with different types of switches and routers and things like that. We did develop our own solution for some of the types of equipment, and we do have a general purpose request management system that helps companies to kind of work through a lot of the legal process aspects and working with the various law enforcement agencies. So in some cases, we often just start off with just doing the management of the request management side of it, vetting the requests and helping people to essentially meet the requirements. The one thing I would say is that in many cases some of the first steps is just having that conversation get started, because a lot of there's many different operators throughout the U.S. So and the law enforcement agencies don't necessarily have contact with all of them, but to the extent that we can help facilitate those communications, I think it makes it a lot easier as things go forward. Especially if the ISPs are taking the first step to make contact, because at least then the law enforcement agencies understand that that the companies are looking to be compliant and take care of whatever is needed to be able to respond to any sort of requests that might come in.
There you go. So let's go back to we're gonna just and I apologize for getting you on here last minute. Next time we'll have to schedule something, but I do appreciate it. Steven has a network that is basically fully natted. In other words, all of his customers, all a couple hundred customers or however many they are all behind a large network address translation system. So there's maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 IPs for the bulk of the customers. Can those types of wireless ISPs, especially with the IPv4 depletion now, we have ISPs going, I can't get more IPs, I can't get those IPs. How does that affect the Clea compliance or them being able to be compliant?
Well, it's sort of interesting that this got brought up because we were actually working on some RFPs in another country around this very same type of issue. And part of it had to do with the fact that a lot of the NATs, their focus is on making the bindings, not doing the logging, and so in many cases the logs tend to get stopped if the equipment's running too hot. So we had actually been developing a solution to monitor the inside and outside interfaces, basically pull the watch some of that traffic so we understand what the bindings are and actually be able to identify what they are in pretty real time. It's more of a kind of a big data analysis type of thing. But the general idea there was in many cases the law enforcement guys are seeing some public address, wanting to investigate that further and then try to identify what the actual private side IP address of the customer is. So that type of solution was aimed at trying to narrow that down so that if they did need to do any sort of interception, they could focus more closely on not just watching the whole network, which is probably too big a task to even be attempting, but to have it focused on looking for a particular subscriber if they need to narrow it down.
Sure. So I guess then the question comes is currently, if you have a network that is fully natted, can they be compliant?
I think and see, this is where it may get into some of the legal distinctions. My colleague Tony probably could have addressed some of that a little bit better, but the way I think some of the laws are focused in the U.S., it is looking at providing available information, and they're going to want to be essentially doing the research to narrow something down before they could actually apply a request to a specific facility of a specific user. So it's sort of this chicken or egg thing. You can't serve the request on the specific user until you know who it is, but you might not know who it is until you are able to translate some ephemeral public IP address and tie that behavior that's publicly visible down to that user that's only known more privately on the network. So yeah, I think that's where we'd have to probably have a little bit more
talk
discussion.
To the lawyer, right? Gotcha. Steve, do you have any questions for Michael? I know we got him at the last minute, so he's probably sitting in an airport traveling or something right now.
Well, my question is, Dennis talked about we could do this for ourselves, but Yana is a company that does it for you. And like we talked about earlier, Dennis mentioned that, so law enforcement comes to your door with a Calea Complaince service. You guys are the folks that if I signed up with your service, you would take that and you've got, like Dennis said, the lawyers to review the thing. Yep, this is legit. You need to comply. Yana is the company that would be the source to do that, correct?
Yeah, yes, that was something that we had set up, and offered that to WISP in general. I think the business model was trying to do it on a sort of a subscription basis, because in many cases, there's a lot of WISPs that may never see an order But once they do see one, then they're trying to figure out how to quickly respond to that.
Right.
And I think there was one instance in the past where somebody that wasn't a subscriber, but then did get a request, called us up and we assisted them.
Mm-hmm.
So
you guys are basically instead of, like Dennis said, we could do that ourselves. And in my case, maybe I can't afford a third-party solution like you guys, but in essence, you guys would, if I were to sign up with you folks, you guys would be my Calea Compliance officer for the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to be careful about the terms, because I think ultimately the responsibility, doesn't get away from the service provider.
Well, absolutely.
But yes, we can, that's kind of the role that we've generally played, is that trusted third party, where we're known to the law enforcement side and, work on the behalf of the service providers to, help them to meet the needs of the law enforcement agencies.
As an advocate, I guess is what
Yes.
I guess what I'm saying. Gotcha.
Yeah. So lots of options here, and of course, if anybody needs to contact them, I got up on the page. They got the office locations at a number of different places, phone number. I put all that up on the video. I know Michael can't see it, but it is up online, and their website is YAANA.com. For anybody that's interested in their services. It's always good information. And, Michael, I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on here, especially at the last minute. I mean, this was not something that was planned by any means. But, it's always good to have an expert, a subject matter expert on the line.
Yeah,
Sure,
people who
no
make
problem.
their living doing this stuff. And I appreciate it being on the phone as well, Michael. And maybe we have you on for a full show in the near future to tell us exactly how Yana came about, unless you've got time to do it now, but dedicate an hour a show to you.
Let me talk to our folks about planning something like that. I think we have done a couple of presentations at like Wispalooza. I think I did one a couple years ago. But yeah, it always is worth kind of sharing in case there's any new folks around that kind of need to understand who we were and where we came from.
Exactly.
Yeah, we get one of their sales guys, because Michael's definitely the technical head end on a lot of things. He gets into some of these meetings with me, and he starts spouting off different things. I'm like, okay, there's enough acronyms here to have an alphabet, so and that's a good thing. I mean, he definitely knows what he's talking about. But and like I said, I definitely appreciate you taking the few moments of your time. So. With that, Steve, I think we're pretty much good, unless I don't think we got any questions online. I'll just double check just in case. But I don't think we have any questions online, so yep, nothing. So we can go ahead and wrap her up if you're game.
Yeah, next week we've got going to be on the phone with us a gentleman I met at the Wispalooza. Let me pull up his information. And he's with Bill Gursky with Huana, I think it is. They're a very large provider of products and services for ISPs, and I think he'll be a great show. So if you guys tune in next week, that's who we'll be interviewing to talk about what they have to offer us as ISPs. And again, want to thank the folks from Yana for being on in such short order. And Dennis, I appreciate you putting on the show and producing it and being the brains behind it all.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, I think Michael is definitely a powerhouse when it comes to information in that particular aspect, and I'm glad he had a few moments just to hop on with us and chit chat. I'm sure we're going to get somebody from his little more sales staff that can get with us, and we'll get somebody on that can talk a little bit more about their products and services even better. So with that said, I guess we will cut out of here. Anything last word, Stephen?
That's it. Let's wrap it up, Dennis. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you for listening to ISP Radio. We hope you've gained new insights and additional wisdom in our industry as well as your business. Please remember to visit our show sponsors via the links on ispradio.com. If you're interested in becoming a show sponsor, contact us at sales@ispradio.com. Now go out there and push those packets as fast as you can. Good luck and Godspeed.